genotype ko kayo lahat, and then some of you would be big A, big A, some would be a hetero, some of you would be a homozygous recessive. And if, for example, this particular quantitative thing that we are trying to evaluate, so ginroup ko, kinuha yung mean, lahat ng A, heterozygote and small AA, and ito yung kanilang genetic value. You would see a pattern, okay, that the heterozygote is somewhere in between the two. Okay? So if we try to graph that, actually, guys, if we try to graph that, you would see that it's forming somewhat like a ladder pattern. Okay, ginraph ko yung beats natin, mapapansin nyo that it is somehow like a ladder. Okay? So that's one way for us to recognize the type of gene action if it's forming a ladder type. Okay. So as more, if you look closely, if you look more closely, guys, okay, as the number of big A and the big A increases, then you would see an increase in the performance. Okay. So the heterozygote is somewhere in between. Okay. And again, it's co-dominant. It's analogous to co-dominance if you're talking of qualitative traits. Okay. For the non-additive gene action, we have dominance. Wherein the members of an allylic pair could interact to give a certain phenotypic effect. Okay. So dominance. The dominance could be complete, okay, wherein both the hetero and the homozygous dominant, okay, would have the same phenotypic effect. Pareho sila would exhibit the dominant phenotype. Okay, if it's a qualitative thing, that's very easy for us, no? Maybe we are, right? But again, if for example it's a phenotypic, it's a performance, you have phenotypic units or values, you would see that the performance of the hetero are just as compared to the home. Okay? So, kung kunin ko rin yung genotype ninyo, classify ko kayo, kunin ko yung mean nyo, okay, you would see that the hetero and the homo would have the same, would exhibit the same value. So, if we try to graph that, how would it look like, guys? How would it look like? So, you have your AA, what would happen to your hetero? If you guys graph. So, first, tama ba
Same
yun?
lang.
So B is on B, right? So it's dominance. And again, sabi ng qualitative ako, pag qualitative trait, mas madali lang siya makita. Okay? We also have incomplete dominance, wherein it's also, there's partial dominance in the heterozygote is any value between the homozygotes other than exactly halfway between. Okay, so partial dominance, if the heterozygote is any value, okay, between the homozygotes other than exactly halfway. Okay. So, meron din po tayo again co-dominance, okay, as in the case for qualitative traits, wherein both are expressed. And heterozygotes will show both the homozygous types in the case of qualitative traits, right? Like the road code model that we have as an example in our exercise one. Okay. So incomplete dominance, there's partial dominance. Okay, so it's a complete masking of the recessive allele. Okay, co-dominance naman po for qualitative traits, okay, both the alleles are being expressed. Okay, so heterozygotes will show characteristics of both the homozygous alleles. Okay, let me give you an example, a real-life example. Okay, what do you anything is a type of gene action. If it is. So, ovulation rate and litter size, they are both quantitative units. And so the genotype, we have three genotypes, simple lang muna po. So we have the plus plus, okay, homozygous for the plus. Okay. We have a hetero, which is B plus, representations of the women, so don't be confused. And you have the homozygous dominant. Okay. For ovulation rate, if it's plus plus, completely zero. If it's a hetero, okay, the ovulation rate will be somehow 1.6. And if it's BB, you have 3.6. What do you think would be the type of gene action? Begin. Yeah, okay. It is somehow formed into a ladder pattern. Although we need to completely big way, but somehow you will see that if it's zero, is if you have the big allele present, as siya. But if you have two big alleles, so scaling 1.26 times 2, more or less, nasa 3. Okay, so you would see another pattern. Okay, what about letter signs? The effect of the gene action. You have the same gene, but the action would be a little bit different in terms of how it affects letter signs. If it's plus plus, 0, zero. Okay. If you have a B plus, the two of them together, it's 0.67. Okay. If it's a complete BB, then you have 0.77 as the letter size. What do you think is the gene action? Tingin gene action. Miguel. Bakit incomplete or partial dominance? Yes, and hindi naman siya exactly pare-parehas. Although very close to 5.1. Okay. So this is partial or incomplete. Okay, so we are seeing the effect of gene action, different gene actions on actual conflict. Okay. So sa lab, napakita natin yung dominance na mag-polarize and other variations in the configurations through qualitative traits. I hope you won't be confused. No? There's still dominance so using the two laws of Mendel, nakita natin yung possible ratios and so on and so forth. That's very easy no? Because we're talking of qualitative traits. No? But if you put it into the context of quantitative traits, okay, you have to see patterns, different patterns. Okay. Now we have non-additive gene action still, and we have over-dominance. Over-dominance. No? The heterozygote is outside the range of the two homozygotes. Okay. Of course, if there's over-dominance, there's also under-dominance, but that's not really discussed very well. No? But for over-dominance, okay, the performance of the animal is outside the range of the heterozygote. Sige nga guys, how do we imagine that? Sige mo. If we try to graph it, how would it look like? Bell-shaped curve. Mas mataas yun. Put that together. Okay? So, ang sabi dyan ay the homozygote is outside the range. So, if you calculate that guys, okay, you have your A, okay, you have your A, the two homozygotes. How would would the hetero perform if it's outside your reach? So definitely much better than the homo recessive. And it should be much better than the homo zygous dominant. So how would the hetero look like? So if it's over dominance, guys, it's much better than which is actually, if you look at it carefully, it is heterocystic. It's way beyond the average of the lead pair of the two homozygous parents. Am I making sense, guys? Naiintindihan nyo ba natin? Okay. Ito pong additive, nasa gitna pa siya. More or less, nandun pa siya sa gitna ng dalawa homozygous dominant. But here, because of gene interaction, that's only unique to this individual. Okay, yung performance is way better than the performance. Okay. Now my next question is, since it's an interaction between big A and small a, could it be passed down? The answer is no. Why? Because following our previous discussion of the nucleogenesis, okay, only half could be given, and only half are proposed as a sperm cell. So the interaction, okay, remains in the individual and cannot be passed down. Does it make sense, guys? Okay, that's why ang heteros is hindi siya napapaman. Okay, that's the common misconception. Kasi akala ng mga farmers, ay, galing, no? Gagawin niya ng breeder animal. But then, pansin nila, bakit naging siya suyo, may ibang performance? Kasi nga, it cannot be the interaction or the non-active gene action cannot be transferred. So that's, I'm talking of practical terms, in practical terms. Okay. We also have epistasis, okay, wherein the separate pairs of genes may interact with each other to produce a particular phenotype. So it's not just a matter of the interaction between the gene pair. We're talking of an interaction between more than a gene pair. Okay? If you remember yung ating exercise 1, wherein ito nag-interact with this one, giving rise to an albino. Do you remember that? So you have two gene pairs, different gene pairs, okay, dictating the effect of the phenotype. Okay? So the gene action at one locus may not be constant, depending on the genotype at another locus. Okay? So the gene action is not constant. And for quantitative traits, easy to have a look, no? But then for quantitative traits, this is called an interaction. Interaction. Right now, I'm analyzing the data of process. And in my statistical model, I'm trying to look at the interaction, right, of the different breeds of breed process. So it would depend on the paternal and maternal genetics, and I look at the interaction. So if you try to imagine, it's an interaction. They would interact. Okay. If we try to visualize apart from the graphs that I showed you, okay, here's another way. And look at this, the reference of SIG, okay, for this part, no? So if you look at it in the graph, okay, in the line naman yung tsura, no? Okay, so active gene action, co-dominance for qualitative traits, you'll see that the heterozygote is the two, right? Just like that explained. It's complete dominance in the phenotype of the AB and the BB, it will be the same. It's complete dominance. If it's partial, sabi it's somewhere in between. Okay? So it's not really mean halfway, pwede na dito siya, or pwede na dito siya sa dulo. Okay? So not exactly mean halfway. And if it's over dominance, then you have both homo and the performance of the other types of inheritance. If you look at different literature, they would have different headings. No? Some would call it like other types of gene action. Others would call it like other types of inheritance. Other literature would still call it as variations in phenotypic integration. Okay, so iba-iba, it would depend on which literature you're looking at. And even others would call it as non-repeated inheritance, where it does not segregate according to the lineage. Okay, so linkage, that was our exercise 2. So in support of this, no? We said that linkage, wherein the genes that are close together tend to be inherited together, right? Okay, and you would see variations in the phenotypic integration. Tama ba, guys? So you have your coupling linkage, and you also have your repulsion linkage, right? And we also said that we could compute the map distance, which is also equal to the percent crossing over, or equal also to your set coordinates. So we won't go through that anymore. Add them together, right? So linkage here refers to sex linkage or autosomal linkage. Sige po, saan po nakalink yung genes? Ang chromosomes, autosomes, or sa sex? Chromosomes. So sa autosomes. It's autosomal linkage. Okay. We also have a partner, which is your sex linkage or sex linked genes. So genes on the sex chromosomes may be your X or your Z, but remember your Z is just a representation for your body species. Sorry. Okay, so for your sex linked genes, the genes are linking your X chromosomes or your Z chromosomes. Theoretically, we do not consider the Y and the W as having the gene pair. So, para siyang photogenetic expression we about. But let's not go into that. But you have the X and the Z only, not the W and the Y. Okay. Thus, you can say that we have to calculate the genotype frequencies, the genotypic frequencies separately for male and female. Okay, kaya tama po yung mga ginawa niyo sa exercise niyo wherein, for example, you consider the phenotype, if it's a ratio, you consider the phenotype of the male and that of the female. Okay. So we also have the sex-limited gene action. So some literature call it as gene action. So sex-limited gene action or sex-limited inheritance. This is only shown in one of the sex, and your sex-limited genes are actually found in the autosomes. So sex-limited gene action or sex-limited inheritance. Okay. An example na rin ng quantitative traits requires, we have the hen feathering and the cock feathering, if you remember. Wherein the hen feathers are limited to the female. And for the cock feathers, we have the cock feathering, which is just exclusively sa mga lalaki. Okay? So that's an example. We have sex-influenced gene action, wherein they may have the same genotype, as in the case of a hen heterozygote. Okay? They have the same genotype, but the expression of the trait would depend on the sex of the individual. So for example, would be the presence or absence of the horn, tama ba ba? If you remember also the mahogany is red, di ba yun? May example natin. So it would depend on that red and mahogany. So that the color is qualitative in nature, and it will depend on the sex of the individual, even if they have the same genotype. Genomic imprinting. So the appearance of the individual would depend on which parent would contribute, contributed which allele. So you mentioned before, we have if it's paternally imprinted, then it's the maternal allele that's being expressed. And of course, it's the opposite. If it's maternally infected, then the paternal allele will be expressed. So basically, imagine yung mga sa ating exam, or the practice with the West exam, I will be giving you cases of gene action, and you have to tell me yung passage ng gene action. Okay? So generally, think pleography, pleographic effects. So we have an allele at a single locus, and it would have an influence on more than one trait. So you have an allele at a single locus, or then you have a gene pair, but then it would have an effect on more than one trait. Ano po example nito? It's the B allele, the evolution allele. Okay, here, you look at it, affect the evolution. Okay. So it's a single gene pair, but then ang effect niya will be an ovulation rate and that of the person. Okay, right? So that's pleographic effects. Now, because of pleography, it's possible that you would have genetic correlations. Okay, pero we'll talk about that. But just remember that, okay, the trait, okay, pwede hindi yung gene, isang gene, pwede kung hindi lang isang trait na ma-affectan. So, we're in one. Variable expressivity. This is the case where the genotype of a trait is expressed to a greater or lesser degree in the phenotype. So the genotype of a trait, genes for that, being a hetero or homo, but the way that it's being expressed would be to a greater or lesser degree. So possible na pareho yung gene type, but then ay magkaiba kayo na expression na yung variable expressivity. Okay. You have cytoplasmic inheritance. Okay. It's not a gene action, but it's inheritance. So cytoplasmic inheritance. It's a non-mediated inheritance. Okay. So you have your genetic material outside the nucleus. As I have mentioned before, you have your mitochondrial DNA. And because of the mitochondrial DNA, you would actually look into the maternal lineage. Maternal lineage, okay, there's mitochondrial DNA. You could trace the maternal lineage of its cytoplasmic. I don't know how to, sasabi nila, the intelligence of the offspring will depend on the female parent, on the mother. Okay? Sasabi ng contribution ng nanay in terms of the cytoplasm is higher as compared to the contribution of the father. And ano to, sabi nila, pag matalino daw, that is her nanay. Okay? So, let's try focus na ba tayo? Okay. Gusto niyo mag-try mag-please? Try exercise over. Sige po, pinipin one for short paper.
Ay, ano to eh.
Bonus
Tinanggal ko lang.
Bonus quiz.
Oh, may bonus. Ito yung ano, may tissue eh.
Bonus
Wipes.
Pwede may wipes.
Mayroon kong open notes if you want. But let's try to digest. Okay, so don't forget to write your name and the date. So, what do you think?
Yung yun yung
What do you think is the type of gene action? So you have the cavity. It causes extreme muscularity in the sheep. So you have the right.
Thank you.
Lambs that inherit the cavity gene from their dams, however, do not show extreme muscularity. Ano po kaya? Time ng gene action or inheritance. So this is an actual case. Okay, so muscularity. So the lambs that inherit the cavity gene from their dams, however, do not show extreme muscularity. Type of gene action, type of inheritance, or type of non-immediate inheritance or variations. That's the first case. Always peaceful. How many points? I said 10 points. Number 2. Points each. Number 2 the ball. So what is the type of gene action? So actually sa farm data ito lang tayo nag-ganito. Baboy siya, pero hoof type. Naka-fuse ko yung paa. Okay. So what do you think is the type of gene action or inherited nominated as result? It's male-footed. It produces a foot. Parang foot ng kabayo. Instead ng two-toed. So animals with the mule foot genotype can have from 1, so affected, to 4 feet na lahat yung footed. 2 points footed. Okay, so if you have that gene, it's either isang paa, o apat na paa, o tatlo, o dalawa, ang mule. So possible na pareho may gene for mule foot, tama. Pero may yung isa, apat lahat of toes niya ay affected. Pero ako,
Isa lang.
affected sa akin. Pero hindi mule foot na gene. So that's the case. The last one. And the second to the last one. So 2 points ulit. What is the type of gene action here? Certain cow families are better than others. Certain cow families are better. Cow families are better than others. These are bull families. Certain cow families are better than others. Last one. So 2, 4, 6, number 1, 8. So number 4 na. Okay na tayo? We move to the next. Okay. Ito na makadali lang. Okay. What is the type of gene action or slash inheritance? So the home type would depend on the gene type, the interaction. Yes, if it's a rose, the dominant one, dominant allele will have an interaction with this one as well. If it's B type, the recessive interacting with B. If it's walnut, R interacting with B. If it's single, then you
Wala.
Ha? Hindi pa bonus. Sige po. Anong sagot natin? Actually po, exchange paper na po tayo. Exchange paper. Exchange paper. Challenge. Ano ba tayo ng reactions? Ito po, ang Beach. Bakit siya cytoplasmic inheritance?
No,
That's not the answer.
Ay, akala ko yun yung
Bakit naisip cytoplasmic inheritance?
Ano yung sa'yo?
addictive. Qualitative eh. Kailangan ba isulat na rin? Hindi.
Close, very close to get, but hindi siya. Bakit siya namin yung printing?
Kasi independent ko sa mga kulang. Like, sa amin na rin, sa amin na inherent yung gene na yung depende yun yung express. Hindi siya depende sa gender and sa mga offspring. Napag-inherit ang genes.
Okay. Sino pang may ibang answer? Sex.
Same.
Sex influence. Bakit siya sex influence? Guys, pareho sila ng mga lalaki, di ba yan?
Ay,
Okay. So, sex influence. Pag sex influence kasi, same genotype, but then you have different phenotype. So, sex influence kayo, two reasons sunod mo.
Additive mo.
Ha?
Additive.
Additive. Bakit mo naisip na additive?
Wala lang po yung nagmamadali na po kasi ako.
Ano?
Tapos nakita ko na qualitative yung mas kinarin ko yan.
Pulo. Sex influence or sex influence. Any other nasagot? The correct answer is generally unique. Okay, that's correct. Why, guys? First, yung explain mo na, inherit mo both eh. Okay, nag-inherit mo. Kasi it's a gene pair. But then, if it's coming from the mother, okay, the other one is silent. Okay. So, yun nga po, it would depend. Okay. Kung saan nila nakuha yung calibrate sheets na tayo program sa tablet. Okay. Ito po. Ano pong, ano dyan?
variable expressivity.
Very good. It's variable expressivity.
Waldo.
Because the other sheet could be expressed fully or not. Tama po, guys.
Isang tama lang ako.
May iba pa bang may sagot? Wala na. Sige po. Ito po, guys. Certain cow families are better than others.
Cytoplasmic.
This is cytoplasmic.
Yes!
Kasi it depends on the maternal lineage ng cow. Okay?
May
It
iba pa.
depends on the maternal lineage of the cow. So, it's cytoplasmic or mitochondrial. Cytoplasmic inheritance.
Kasi may mga mas
And the
magaling.
last one, guys, would be epistasis.
Shit, my
So, sa exam po natin, 5 points po yun. Nasabihan ko lang answer. So, you will be given cases. You're going to analyze, critical thinking tayo. Anong most likely to action?
Mahirap.
Pwede bibigyan ng data, pwede bibigyan ng graph, pwede bibigyan ng situation.
Epistasis.
Pwede case analysis. Pakilagyan na lang po ulit ng score. So, that will be added on top of your
Ilang ka?
Kasi mababa ko yun.
Grabe.
2 points each po. 2 points each po. So, total of 8.
Pinam ko lang yung sex link eh.
May naka-perfect po na 8. Wow. Okay, so sad. Okay. May naka-0 pa. Kung may naka-0, mabibigyan pa ka ng 2 points. lahat kayo may bonus points. Okay, pabalik na instrument sa inyo.
Yay!
Thank you po.
Spinam ko yung 6 link eh.
Kaya nga eh.
Ano yung episode? Interaction of two genes.
Okay. Paano ba
Interaction of two genes. Bali, two genes.
Tapos, pag, interaction, dalawang genes. Tapos may iba-iba silang lalabas.
Wala na naman nakalagay. Basta may interaction ng mga two genes.
Separate pair of genes may inherit with each other.
Ay!
Kaya niya mag-produce ng iba pang phenotype.
Okay. Asan yung ano? Ayun, cytoplasm. Ba't wala akong notes? Ano yung isang tao? Yung number?
Number ng cytoplasmic.
Number 3.
Oo. Yung fiber.
2 lang na tao ako.
Yun, bawi na isa.
Yung number 1. Genomic.
Number?
Number 1. Genomic imprinting.
Yung genomic.
Ba't siya naging genomic?
Parang kung yung anak ba niya magiging katulad din sa kung ano meron na siya, magiging ganun yung anak niya. Kasi,
Ewan ko. Basta nakita ko lang na ano, may nanay na keyword or ano. Hindi ko lang sex.
mahirap sabihin yung sexy kasi yung pag sexy, parang yung sinabi mo na, eto, naggagatas ka. Hindi
Oo.
magagatas ka. Ganun. Yung buti na cytoplasmic ako kasi hindi siya sex-linked kasi. Sa cytoplasmic, hindi siya palaging constant na maggagatas ka. Merong mga magagaling na naggagatas. Kasi sabi di ba, there are cows na mas maganda yun. So bali, merong, paano ko ba ma-explain? Sex-linked na siya. Pero meron pang mas maganda yung performance.
Yes.
So bali, nai-inherit yung magandang performance. Depende sa nanay. Sayang yung sa yung sa yung una talaga.
Number 1? Bari na.
Pero nakakalito yung
Yun nga eh. Alam ko talaga may sagot ng genomic na ano, imprinting. Hindi ko lang alam. Nakalimutan ko yung ano, definition. Iniisip ko. Wala ka ng klase? Sige na lang.
Kaya ako nakaputi. Basketball.
Di kayo kailangan mag-ano, jersey?
Ano kami, magkaka-jersey kami. Dapat magpaplano na kami.
Oo.
Ayun. Baka maglalaro na kami kasi tapos na yung 1 month.
Saan ka?
Dito na ako.
Dito ako.
Ingat yan.
Ingat.